Okay, here's a test shot. It's about 11:30, maybe a little later on Saturday morning, November 22nd, 2008 in downtown Oklahoma City at the anti-Fed Death to the Fed rally. Light check, sound check, crowd check.
In the 1970s, there was a movie called Network. It was the 70s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And you guys remember as he sat down, came in out of the rain, he sat down at his news desk and he said, "I don't have to tell you things are bad, and I don't have to tell you guys that things are cold, because it's cold this morning, but I think we're going to make it because we have a good purpose." Thomas Jefferson said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies." I think that it is amazing today that we've seen our Federal Reserve central banking system that has reared its head in America before and been defeated, today again taking our liberties, taking our money, and taking over our government. With the bailout, we've seen our politicians, our elected quote-unquote representatives, giving in to banking interests over and over again. And it's time that it stops. It's time that the people come together in front of the Federal Reserve and say, "End the Fed."
End the Fed!
I have the honor today of introducing some wonderful speakers, a lot of people who are near and dear to my heart, who I know very well, and we're going to get right to that so that we can give them as much time as possible. Our first speaker is a man named Ryan Underwood. Ryan is an organizer in Tulsa. He's helped, he called me the ferryman. I ferried him across the street, but he's ferried a lot of people into the knowledge of liberty, limited government, and the Constitution. Everybody, Ryan Underwood.
I've never used one of these before, so...
That's okay. They hadn't cured baldness in the 21st century either.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah! I typed this last night, but you'll have to forgive me if my mouth stops moving before I can complete it. George Orwell, when he wrote the novel 1984, drew on countless examples of government in action in order to bring life to his ministry of truth. The Federal Reserve is an institution which fits Orwell's vision, since it is neither federal nor does it have any reserves. We are gathered here today not because every one of us knows how the Federal Reserve, the Fed, enables perpetual war and empire building. Not every one of us knows how the Fed destabilizes society through class warfare. Not every one of us knows the subtle costs of an economy based on paper and debt versus one built on savings and real capital. And not every one of us knows how the Fed is a threat not only to our country's independence, but to the independence of our families and small businesses. One thing is certain. If you have only recently become alarmed by the Fed thanks to the conspicuous corporate bailouts of this past year, talking to the person standing next to you today will be like drinking from a fire hose. The ways in which the Fed perverts free market capitalism and subverts liberty and independence are too numerous to count. Indeed, every business decision or economic calculation made at any point in time is influenced directly or indirectly by the Fed and its policies. Today, you will also learn much about patriotism. Patriotism does not have much to do with flags or with federal buildings. Among this crowd are many people who are intelligent enough to become, if they wished, part of the Wall Street class that profits from the Fed's existence. They are intelligent enough to become, if they wished, economists who could spend their entire career propagandizing for central banking and receive Nobel Prizes for it. Some of them have even become politicians and could certainly have long careers guaranteed for them in Washington, D.C., if only they would endorse the Fed. But today you're among patriots, people who recognize evil institutions and refuse to conduct business with them, much less to join in league with them in order to make some short-term profit. Today you are among people who recognize the road to serfdom that we are on and who refuse to embark on it. Today you are among people who agree with Thomas Jefferson when he said, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." I am often asked how it is that, although no law exists compelling us to pay Federal Reserve notes for goods and labor, we end up holding and transacting in Federal Reserve notes anyway. There are many reasons for this, only a few of which you may be aware. There are laws that compel merchants to accept anything marked legal tender, including that which the government marks legal tender. Laws that prevent private minting of gold and silver dollars. Taxes on gold and silver bullion sales. Court-ordered fines and judgments which must be paid in Federal Reserve notes, and compulsory taxes such as the income tax which must be paid in Federal Reserve notes. While money of gold and silver arises naturally in the business affairs of free men, even in the absence of government, men must be convinced with various forms of force to use government paper money in place of gold and silver. This, above all, should give us a glimpse into the true nature of paper money. It is fundamental to any scheme of total control over our lives and affairs. The Fed, being willing to issue new money in exchange for any sort of debt, is the primary financier of the welfare warfare state. It has enabled the American empire to expand around the world with 700 military bases in 150 countries. Thanks to the Fed and its promises of endless liquidity, we're on the precipice of a government takeover of the capital markets and of the healthcare system. Who will pay for it all? It is said that when the Fed creates new money, everyone will pay. I remind you today that it is not your responsibility to pay. You will be made to pay, but this debt is not yours, since you did not vote for the politicians who spent the money. As there is a constitutional ban on central banking, there is in fact a constitutional ban on corruption of blood. However, your children will be made to pay even though they were not alive when this debt was incurred in their name. Make no mistake, this debt is the government's. Continuing to make payments on the politician's credit card will have the same effect that making payments for a prodigal son would. If their spending doesn't cause their credit rating to suffer, they will continue to take on more debt. If you disagree with what the government in Washington, D.C. does, it is time for you to cease financing it. First and foremost is to stop going into debt and discharge the debts that you have as soon as possible. The second is to convert your savings and your family's savings from Federal Reserve notes and government bonds into gold and silver. Third is to not pay any tax that you can avoid paying. Each person that does these things has made it impossible for government to use them as a source of capital for its nefarious schemes. They have gotten politicians out of their business and financial decisions and can now focus on the economic considerations that build real prosperity. They have unplugged themselves from the system that steals their wealth in order to keep them enslaved. They cannot in any way be held morally accountable for the atrocities the government perpetrates because they were not one of its millions of financiers. How will the government ever pay back its debt if we do not pay? That is the politician's problem. It is no longer my problem, and it should not be your problem. The greatest threat a politician faces is that the government may one day go bankrupt and that he may have to find honest work. Contrary to being a threatening scenario of any sort, the looming fiscal bankruptcy of Washington will disable the moral bankruptcies it propagates. Where previously the lawn was tended by armies of bureaucrats, each blade of grass trimmed to the same equal height, and every weed that threatened the unity of the state removed forcefully. Instead, liberty and prosperity will again sprout and bloom in full glorious color. We do not need to destroy the Federal Reserve or to abolish it. All we must do is starve it. Its lifeblood is inflation. Create through your personal economic policies a stake of gold and silver and drive this stake through its heart.